This morning, we explored the challenges and opportunities we face in increasing diversity in our STEAmed communities, as I like to call them. In this town hall, we are going to hear from leaders in academia and professional societies about promising practices and what they're seeing in terms of the best results in innovative, creative solutions. So I can't wait for this panel. To moderate this town hall, I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Alma Clayton Pedersen. Dr. Clayton Pedersen comes to us from Curtis Lewis and Associates. She's played an instrumental role in a number of NASA Mission STEM related initiatives, most prominently in our Mission STEM's Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Series, where she went out, videotaped, and she has many interviews, presidents and provosts for our NASA-funded universities to say, what are they doing, what's going right, and so that we can share that with our entire community. Dr. Clayton Pedersen is playing a significant role in our own NASA workforce internally as well, giving us robust segments and addressing implicit bias. We heard a lot about this morning. So we're undergoing our own internal training to be as conscious as we can as well and overcome some of this implicit bias. Dr. Clayton Pedersen is a very dynamic speaker as well as a panelist. I'm going to turn it over, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Alma Clayton Pedersen, thank you. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you, David.
We have an hour for this session.
As David said, we have 1 hour for this session. And so I'm going to dispense with doing the long introductions of the individuals who are on the panelists. I'm just going to mention their names, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to run this session. So let me start with, and this will be in the order in which they will speak. Dr. Ann Weaver Hart is the 21st president of the University of Arizona, a post which she's held since 2012. Dr. Michelle Manuel, you've met earlier, but I will say that you met her earlier, and I was very intrigued by this notion of adding humanities to the STEM Plus session endeavor. Dr. Stephen Ruffin is president, we've made you president now. Is professor in aerospace engineering at Georgia Institute of Technology, and he's the director of NASA's Georgia Space Grant Consortium. And then last but certainly not least is Janet Bransdell Koster. She is executive director and CEO of the Association for Women in Science. I have given them each a question that is a prompt. They have been told that they can pay attention to it or not. They've all agreed to pay attention to it, and they will respond to that. Then I will go to the audience and ask you to pose a question that you have on your mind. It could be to that question, but let's hope that it is. And then any two of the respondents of the panelists can respond. Then we'll come back to the next panelist. And in that way, it is active learning. And we're going to try and engage you more. We'll also take people from the audience and from virtually. So if you have virtual questions, please submit them. You have a message as to how to do that. And we have someone in the audience that will pick a question and then pose it, and I will say that question. Are we okay? So let's just get started. This first question is to Ann. Many believe that leadership at the highest institutional levels is needed to address the many challenges that we've heard this morning, that of attaining faculty, professional development for staff, postdoc, and student diversity. What practices have you employed and insights gained about the role of leaders in the success of implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at the University of Arizona?
Well, thank you for that question. It's wonderful to be able to be didactic and pontificate about leadership since it's everyone's favorite subject. And no one knows what it is. But to render the ineffable, I'd like to talk on multiple levels. One of the things that's really important for us to remember, and I think the morning panelists and the morning presenters really highlighted it, is that we're talking about a social issue, a social fabric issue that is far more complex than just the disciplinary knowledge and facility with that knowledge that the STEM disciplines represent. And we often retreat into the rational, well, if I just were better at math, if I were just better at math, or if I just got a better score on my SAT, that somehow everything would magically fall through and those opportunities would be available. So I'd like to address your question on a symbolic level, because we know that symbols and beliefs play a huge part in how we make decisions. On a political level, because we know that power is a dynamic that really involves how we understand things and how we work together on a social level, because how we interact as human beings and how we feel about ourselves in the social fabric is really important to us, and on an organizational level because there are structures that make things happen or that make it more difficult for things to happen. So let me start with the easiest, which is the structural. We heard this morning about a number of very specific programs, fellowships, scholarships, financial aid, necessary but not sufficient ways in which we can intervene. And in some ways that's almost the easiest, even though that's what we think about the most. But things like at the University of Arizona, a program where we've taken service for kids who are having, or tutoring for students who might be having struggles, turning it into a think tank, turning it into a social environment and an expectation. And then everybody who wants to hangs out at the library or at the think tank. They get together for preparation for exams, they do things together, they plan, they tutor. It becomes just a part of what you do with kids. So instead of sitting alone in your dorm room doing problems by yourself while all your roommates are out having fun, you're all at the think tank together doing those problem sets and getting that social interaction as a young adult at the same time. We also have a number of summer programs that are very, very important. I think that those foundational partnerships are huge. Tucson Unified School District has a number of programs with us that begin at the junior high level. We are going to have a 35% minority entering class into our medical school this year because in large part we have a Summer Pathways program and a partnership with the Intertribal Council and with the largest Native American nation in the US, with the Navajo. And those are programs that start early in a young person's life and build that foundation. And we heard about a number of those kinds of programs. On the symbolic level, what you believe and what you believe in and what's important to you and what you value, I think is critical. And we heard this morning about the things we can say or do to support each other. On the political level, power matters. And so the assistant professor without tenure truly does have less power, but sometimes we can abuse that power. And as leaders, we all have to remember that sometimes we do have real power, but mostly it's symbolic power. And we should use that symbolic power whenever we can. And lastly, maybe I'm at a stage in my life where I think it's really important to get back to that normalization theme we heard this morning. It's got to be normal to be good at STEM. It's got to be normal to go to the lab and come home to a sink full of dirty dishes and have a family and have a spouse and to have a sign on your bedroom door that says you have a father, ask him when you're studying for your qualifying exams. And it has to be normal, and you have to not worry about never getting a date if you're in an engineering program because everybody will think you're weird. And until we take the men we work with and the women whom we admire and all of us together treat it like it's a normal thing to do, and you can be a real human being and have a life, I think we're uphill battle.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, back to you, audience, participants. Do you have a question, comment, something you're doing on your campus that would add to what Ann has talked about?
Well, let me tell you a story while you're thinking of one of your own.
Before you do that, there are 2 mics, one on either side, and please speak into the mic, and if we can't get it together, I will repeat the question.
Hi, I'm Lindy Elkins-Tanton from your neighbor from Arizona
North.
State. Exactly.
Arizona State.
And so I have a question that follows directly on your comments. We've been talking a lot about filling the pipeline and bringing people up, but a concern that I have, in fact an obsession, is with the culture of academia and research institutions. And it comes to this power question that you brought up. I think we have to really change the culture of STEM in academia such that the senior faculty who believes that his or her voice should carry the day uses their power to help people instead of to show them how they're wrong. And we have to have a culture where it's okay to have wrong answers because they lead to right answers. We can talk about success in filling our applicant pools and having the right kind of rubric as long as we like, but if there isn't a culture where everyone can succeed, then no amount of hiring will ever help. And I know that changing culture is very difficult, but it's something I and a lot of people are working on, and I would love to hear your thoughts about how to change culture.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that question. I didn't pay her to tell so I could tell my story. Last summer, a number of us were on a special mission with the JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, which is also doing an asteroid project, much like we are, with those of you who are ready for the OSIRIS-REx launch in a month. Yay, go U of A. And Arizona State has a project on that launch as well. But one of the things that the women at JAXA asked the women from the University of Arizona who were at that meeting was exactly that. How do you change the culture of academia with program structures? And the answer I gave was not well received by the Japanese space scientists in the room. And that was, until the women who come to work at your space agency know that the men whom they love and with whom they are building families are going to treat them with the same kind of respect and equality, and are going to build families where the men and the women both do tasks that relate to their professional and knowledge base work, but also to their family-based work. You're not going to change the organizational culture until you change the family culture. Randy and I have 4 daughters. The story about you have a father, ask him is real. I did not take my qualifying exams until I had 4 daughters. And it is, but I was embarrassed to tell that story. For years, I didn't tell anybody I was 31 years old and the mother of 4 when I started graduate school. For years, because I was embarrassed. And until we change those expectations of you don't want people to know you're too girly. Heaven forbid you sit and talk about shoes in the back room, but guess what? We had a joke about lipstick this morning. I hope everyone in the room noticed that David did that without it, but nobody dared laugh. So that's how you change culture, from the human family base up, so that you know you can have a date, you know you can do things together, you know that you can be a real human being and have a family. That's how you build the family to the social group, to the larger organization, and that's when the older members of our academia who are behaving on those old rules notice that the happy people near them don't behave that way.
Would anyone else like to respond to that? Michelle, Stephen? No. Okay.
I also knit, and it doesn't embarrass me anymore. But it used to.
Excellent. Any on the virtual? Okay. So the next respondent is Dr. Manuel. Participants have expressed concern about the challenges of stimulating historically underrepresented populations to pursue STEM disciplines. You've been on the cutting edge of lots of different things, and you've done extremely well. Will you highlight some of the practices that you have engaged in as you develop in your discipline, and what you use now to help your students, your current students?
So 3 words I like to use is community, which we talked about earlier, which is fellowship. We're trying to now bring in students as cohorts. Instead of bringing in students as individuals, we treat them as a cohort. They do everything together as a cohort. They all came in the same year, so they'll face the same struggle. And so we don't individualize groups or stereotype groups that way. Everybody is exactly the same. The international students and the domestic students are treated exactly the same. But at the same time, individuality is important as well. So in that case, what we're doing is we're putting together career programs for each student, each faculty member, and each staff member as well. So everybody has a career plan and trajectory, and that is laid out when they come into the program. And basically, the faculty are there to help them through that process. Now, I think staff is very important because this goes back to the culture comment. In academia, there's faculty and students, but there's also staff that create a culture. I've seen faculty, say things they say to students, they say the same things to staff. Our staff tends to be highly populated with females and highly populated with underrepresented minorities. And the way that students see faculty treat staff, the students now think that's the behavior that we should move forward with in a professional environment. And then lastly is sustainability. It's very important to have these programs that last multiple generations. I talked earlier this morning about 2 programs that I was in, the co-op program and the NASA Harriet G. Jenkins program. I went online, I can't find any information about those programs anymore. So the programs that pipeline me through the system, I'm not sure where they are, or I think they've morphed into something else. So sustainability is an issue. We can't have programs that are tied to just advocates. When that person leaves the institution or that person leaves that department, if that program is not sustainable, that the program essentially disappears. So we have a major issue when we have major initiatives come through, but we don't have a sustainable way to maintain them after the person who's advocating for them leaves.
What are some of the challenges that you faced in developing the cohort model? Because people don't have that as a mindset. So can you say a little bit about that?
So you do have people who will say that you know, the international students, for example, should be treated differently than the domestic students. They have a different background, they have a different culture, they have different expectations. We did that for so many years, and the domestic students were actually, which are in the minority in our programs, international students are the majority of students that come through our graduate programs in engineering, said that they feel disconnected from the international students, which make up most of their classes. So I would teach class, and the domestic students were the first 2 rows, and all the international students sat in the back rows. And so there was some resistance from the faculty, but the students are now demanding that they feel more integrated with each other instead of kind of a clique mentality where groups kind of separate out initially, that everybody's basically treated the same.
Audience. Question from the audience and from virtual? Yes. Would you mind, as we move through, if you're thinking about a question, could you move toward the microphone so we get more interaction with each other? So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm Doug Haynes from UC Irvine. I have to provide orientation to graduate students about diversity as they enter programs. Most people enter programs as individuals and they figure out the relationships as they go through programs, but it's an opportunity that might be missed to sort of expose them to what does diversity mean, the ways in which you can contribute to a positive climate, instead of simply assuming that, you know, I'm a nice person and I do my best.
I think that's really important. We recently had a faculty search, and we have the question, what is your opinion about diversity? And we had several people who were potentially wanting to be faculty members said, well, I work with diverse groups. I work with physicists, and I work with engineers, and so we all have...
And the doctors work with nurses.
Yes. So we actually have all, I realized, yeah, a different definition of what diversity is. And so that leads to perceptions not being equal among the group. So I think that's an excellent point, that basically it's really important to treat everyone as a whole.
Go ahead. Very, very quickly, I would also argue that unless we model using discussions about making sure that we have a broad pool, that we have a diverse pool, our graduate students will see us paying attention to those issues whenever there's a search, whenever there's an admissions. And so all of us need to model making that an everyday discussion. In addition to the one program where you educate them about diversity, it's an everyday thing so that you always acknowledge the comments of the diverse people in the group. You always make sure your disciplinary groups are addressed. It just becomes a part of what you do, and in that way you model it and make it part of normal life.
I'm sorry, can you also say who you are and where you're from?
Professor at Caltech.
Cindy Weinstein.
Cindy Weinstein, hi.
Thank you.
I have a question about a particular challenge to cohort building. What if students don't want to be a part of a cohort? They're happy to be part of a cohort initially, but at a place like Caltech, really what they want to do is be a scientist. And other identity formations are sort of less important to them at different stages in their career. And what would you advise just to be sensitive to that and to manage that? I think it probably has to do with the individuality piece of it that you were talking about as part two. But I sense, at least at Caltech and maybe at other institutions, there's a kind of tension between the cohort building and the desire to be part of a group or not be part of a group.
Can I ask one of the others to respond first, if you have?
Sure, I will, because we see that type of thing at Georgia Tech, and I've seen it at other places as well. So you don't want to force a student to get engaged in things that they're not interested in being engaged in. Fortunately, the larger the cohort, the better the community will be, and those students that want to spend their time doing other things will have less of an impact. What we've tried to do, if we've had programs where we're supplying fellowship funding to students of a particular group, we continue to provide that. We make everything available to all of the students of that cohort. Actually, most of our programs that are geared toward expanding diversity are open to everyone. So we continue to make those available, but never really try to put too much pressure to say that you're required to do this. And you let each student find their way in that way. Usually, when you get students involved, say if they're a graduate student involved with undergraduate outreach programs, they get more and more comfortable with those types of things. So that's what I've found.
Any virtual? Sorry. You're not on. Anyone?
Well, we at the university level have a very, very strong LGBT community that supports the students themselves, but we also have a number of very active faculty and staff and top-level administrators who are members of that community who model for them what those career opportunities are, and it's on a very interpersonal, social level, as in the model of who we can be and what we can do together. And that is all of LGBTQ, and it's a model of openness, but it's also a model of example by achievement and inclusion. It isn't an answer because so many people are going through personal challenges of understanding who they are themselves. It's important for us as a community to be accepting of that process.
And let me remind the audience that there are intersections of these identities as well. Mm-hmm. There are women and people of color, underrepresented populations among them all. Please, thank you for your patience.
No problem. Priya Natarajan from Yale University. So one quick comment is we found one of the challenges at Yale is this intersectionality. The fact that we have to move away from a heteronormative understanding of what a family is, what care obligations are, and so on and so forth, right? We are constantly reminded by our larger community that we need to pay attention to that. The question I really had to you was about the implementation of this creation of community and the role of mentoring, and whether there's layered mentoring, whether graduate students can mentor undergraduates. Has that kind of model been worked, and is that successful? So this peered mentoring that we've heard a lot about, I wondered if there's sort of just layered mentoring, because at Yale, one of the things that sort of worked, but only at the faculty level, and I'm curious to hear whether there are other places where it's worked at other levels, student levels, is to have sort of a sidestep mentoring. So have a mentor who's not going to evaluate you in any way or vote for you, a faculty member in an adjacent department. And that worked really well for junior women in a project that we did. So I was just curious whether that can be replicated at the level of undergrads versus grads versus postdocs, and whether you had some experience and wisdom to share on that.
So as a graduate student, I wrote a paper, a design paper, where we used graduate students as coaches for undergraduate design teams. And so basically we had this hierarchical approach where you have the faculty member, the graduate student, the undergraduate student. But the graduate students essentially served as more than coaches. They were also mentors to the undergraduate students. And that was actually a very fruitful relationship. The outcomes were really positive for the undergraduate students and the graduate students. A lot of them were interested in going into academia in the first place, and so this kind of reflected the kind of role that they would play later on in their career. I try to implement that at my current institution, and most of the resistance that I got were from faculty. And because a lot of faculty want their graduate students to be engaged in research, they felt that this activity was a distraction for the graduate students. So that's one hurdle that I have to face, is trying to convince the faculty members that this is good for the graduate students as well.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, Stephen, did you want to say something behind it? Okay. I'm going to have to hold you for the next one, but please take a seat close by the microphone. So I'm going to introduce Stephen Ruffin and ask him this question. Many of today's participants and in the broader STEM community view developing a broadly diverse faculty in STEM a huge challenge. Can you discuss the practices that you and your colleagues promote to promote faculty diversity? Please also discuss how they are being advanced and sustained at Georgia Tech.
Great, I'll be happy to do that. It's okay, I heard a couple of things this morning I wanted to respond
Absolutely.
to from some of the speakers. Okay, if I do that
Absolutely.
first. So, when we heard from Joel Handelsman this morning from OSTP about a number of things, and one was the power of authentic research experiences. She talked about supporting every level of education. And then from France Cordova from NSF, she mentioned the NSF Includes program, which is a remarkable program that brings together alliances. So I wanted to give one example of that type of program that's supported by NASA. NASA has a number of outstanding programs. One of them is called the NASA Space Grant Program, and it kind of encompasses a couple of these things. The authentic research experiences. The Space Grant Program is a program that does that. It's a K through 16 program. So that program, sponsored by NASA, supports undergraduate and graduate student research projects, does internships, does research infrastructure activities. In addition to that, focused on college students, there's also a big element that focuses on K through 12 students, science centers and camps and things like that, and also does professional development. So it's a pretty large program, and one of the things that is a promising practice of that program is this vertical integration of these activities, really getting undergraduate students involved in K through 12 activities and also in teacher training activities, getting graduate students there mentoring undergraduate students, and it's a remarkable power of this program. The STEM pipeline is one that's very leaky. And what we found is that when we do those types of things, that helps reduce some of this leaking. In this program, for example, in a given year, 88% of the students that are engaged in STEM go on to the next degree level in STEM or to STEM fields as well.
Really good.
It's a large program. We reach around 150,000 K through 12 students, train about 18,000 teachers a year, and reach around 4,500 students, undergraduate and graduate students a year. So that type of engagement, I think, is remarkably helpful. In Georgia, the organizations involved, by the way, are universities, industry, and nonprofit. So in Georgia, we had a high-altitude ballooning program that started at Albany State University, which is an HBCU in southern Georgia. High school in Columbus, Georgia became very interested in doing a hands-on ballooning activity. They went to Albany State. We connected them together. They started doing a high-altitude ballooning program. And then using the data for AP courses, they reach a couple hundred students a year. That, in turn, got transitioned to a community organization in Atlanta that receives funds from a variety of sources, 100 Black Men of Atlanta, from EPA, and a variety of other sources. And they became interested in aerospace things. So this power of community is really the point I want to make. It's the power of community, the power of reaching through different levels. Regarding faculty diversity, So Georgia Tech has had some success in that area, and still has a long way to go, I think, as well. Our mission, our mission is still there to grow it. The way that things that as I've spent time as a faculty member at Georgia Tech, I think there are a couple of things that really got the ball rolling for us to have such a large number of African American, Hispanic, and Native American faculty. And that's leadership from the top. I would say that beginning around 20 years ago, sorry, it takes a long time, about 20 years ago, we had deans of engineering and upper management that was really interested in diversity, and it just made it something that we wanted to be known for. I wish that it permeated the entire campus. I wish that it permeated the entire campus right now. I honestly, I can't say that it does, but it does enough, and there's so many stars and so many folks that are interested in this, and the administration supports and recognizes success in many aspects of what we do as faculty, but including in promoting more diverse environments. So that recognition, that promotion is powerful. Faculty life can be very, like graduate student life, can be very isolated in a way. You're working in your department or with your small number of collaborators. One of the things I think that happened at Georgia Tech to help this, and this helps recruiting as well, was NSF started the AGET program many years ago, and a number of underrepresented minority faculty got together and responded to that NSF funding effort. This created a community. I mean, we did great things with the money that NSF wanted us to do with the money, but it gave the faculty on campus, the faculty that were interested in diversity issues, money that brings us together, but also a reason to build community. The relationships that were built among the faculty at that time continue to carry on today, especially as we've garnered new faculty. So that was one way I think we've built a community. Structurally, one thing Georgia Tech has done is we have a program called the FOCUS program. It started as an undergraduate, underrepresented minority graduate student recruiting program. But there's an element of that called Focus Fellows, and that is where we bring in students that have just finished their PhDs who may be interested in faculty. Bring them into the environment, they meet other faculty, but that's been a way in which I think it's been remarkably helpful in our recruiting.
Thank you, Dr. Roth. And those of you who would like to respond to a question about this, please come on down.
Hi, my name is Sean Ives. I'm from Clarkson University, from upstate New York. We are a STEM-rooted university, and 1 out of 5 Clarkson grads are CEO, VP, or senior leadership in organizations. So we believe we're in the position to contribute to the further advance of diversity in STEM. My question specifically is for Professor Michelle Manuel. You mentioned about the culture of inclusion or lack of in faculty. Do you have any advice or practice for bringing about more inclusiveness, internal policies, and practice for faculty development and tenures?
And thank you for your patience.
That's a lot. Okay. So one thing that we can do is have open conversations. Someone said, we have some issues in the department. How are we going to bring them about? Should we have a retreat? And I think the town hall is actually a better place to do this, where the discussion is moderated, but people have a way of openly discussing issues in a frank but not disrespectful manner. It's not until we start these discussions that we don't get past these barriers that we have where perceptions are there about certain groups and certain stereotypes are there, and we have to have a dialogue in order to overcome those. So that would be one suggestion.
And I would add an informal way.
Go ahead.
And an informal way is for, again, for leaders to model inclusion. So Cecil Miskell was one of my early mentors. We were at a meeting once that he was moderating. It was a very, very important curriculum meeting at the college. I was a graduate student, and I noticed something I'd never seen before, and that's when a low status female member of a diverse group, faculty member, spoke and got ignored. And you've all seen it before, or it's happened to you, where you're in a decision group or a committee and you speak and everybody's polite, but they move on. And then 5 minutes later, somebody who's a little bit more like the other more established members of the group paraphrases the same thing, and all of a sudden it's the best idea that ever happened on earth. And what he had done, and I asked him afterwards how he did it, he spoke in favor of the idea, but very explicitly said, I would like to get back to the idea that Mary Lou put on the table 5 minutes ago and that John reinforced in his point that he just made. And Mary Lou, I wanted to thank you for what you said and expressly talk about how I think this is a breakthrough for our group. Nobody was offended. I couldn't even figure out what he'd done. And what he had done was simply give credit to the person who had the idea without embarrassing anyone in the group, but he also advanced the group. So that's an informal way that leaders can model that kind of inclusive behavior. But you have to attend.
I'm going to let Janet answer, and then we go to the virtual.
Just going to add, there are some great models out there that have come out of the National Science Foundation's Advance program, and they're not any singular one intervention. There are a lot of ways to go about changing the culture in an organizational environment. So I would suggest if you have a chance to take a look at that Advanced site, they've got some great toolkits up there, and I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, this is a virtual question. This is for Professor Manuel. Can you discuss the challenges, best practices in building community if your institution currently does not have large numbers of URM graduate students, postdocs, or faculty? How can one increase the conversion of offers to acceptances for graduate students and for faculty when you recruit?
Yes, I would ask yourself, why are you in that situation that seems very, there's something systemic going on there. And so the question has to be asked of the institution. Sometimes we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and saying, what are we doing wrong first, before we actually make the step of including other people in a disorganized department that is not functioning very well. But to have those low numbers, that would be very alarming.
Yes. But
Well,
also,
that's
go
why,
ahead.
the environment that's there at the university is one of the biggest tools that can affect recruitment. So our faculty that are underrepresented minorities being advanced, are they feeling fulfilled within their careers? Those things, people are going to talk when they're getting recruited. And so having that type of culture, having an environment that you've built is going to be extraordinarily important.
I would add that we ought to also look at the communities in which the institution is housed.
Yeah.
That often efforts to diversify the faculty, student body, postdocs, really are affected by the community as well. You could be doing work and then it'd be counteracted within the community where the institution is housed. And with that, I'm going to turn the question to Janet. You've heard and read about all of the challenges by now. We've heard a lot of them. What practices does the Association of Women in Science employ that differ and address or design to complement the challenges that we've already discussed? As you tell us about them, please also discuss the specific ways that your organization's practices can assist institutions, including NASA-funded museums, in advancing their diversity, equity, and inclusion practices.
Thank you, Emma. So the Association for Women in Science was founded in 1971. At that time, not one single woman of color received a PhD in any field, not only the STEM fields. So we have made some progress. But again, looking at the pipeline, there's a lot more that can be done. Our association focuses very much on the workplace. So we begin to look at issues that are affecting the retention and leadership opportunities for women in STEM. We're multidisciplinary, so we work across all about 75 different disciplines in the STEM fields. One of the things that has come up again throughout the morning and on this panel is the importance of culture and taking a look at culture and also community. And when we look at culture, the very nature of science, technology, engineering, and math in those fields and how they are done, we realized that that had to be an intervention point. So in 2010, we began a program and we worked with 18 of the largest disciplinary societies, from the American Chemical Society, Society of Neuroscience, the American Mathematical Society, again, across disciplines, large societies, small societies. And what we said was, we need to take a look at how the culture of the discipline is impacting the recognition and advancement of women in that discipline. Mm-hmm. And throughout the 5 years of work that we did with those societies, what we found was that, again, it's very much based on the culture of the discipline. So that in math and physics, what we attempted to do was try to get more scholarly recognition for women in those societies, because that's where the publication comes in, that's where publications come in, that's where funding comes in. And women were being recognized for service to the society and for mentoring. They were not being recognized for their scholarly contributions to the society. So again, working in the different disciplines, what we realized that the interventions and best practices, so-called best practices, differed very much across the disciplines. And what we did in putting together plans with one society didn't necessarily work in another society. We also realized that the length of time that it took for change, I think we talked about the length of time and how long some of this cultural change takes, very much, again, based on the discipline. So where we saw a great uptick in the very early efforts and initiatives that we had with the Society for Neuroscience, for example, or the American Chemical Society, it took a very long time for the American Mathematical Society to come on board and to start increasing their awards and recognition of women in that society. We also learned as part of that project that, again, it takes time. It takes different types of intervention. It takes transparency, and I think that's a word that I hadn't heard come up today at all, which I think is very, very important, and that is transparency in your own organization, transparency among the funding agencies, really having an understanding of the data, the baseline data. Where are you coming from? You have to know where you're coming from in order to understand where you're headed. So as part of this project, we worked with the societies to pull the data on the diversity within the society and the recipients of these awards. And in many of the societies, they weren't even keeping track of that. So that is a really important aspect of so much of what we do, is understanding what the data is and what the data tells us. So I would suggest that first. I would also say buying in from top leadership is really important. We asked the society leaders and the executive directors to be part of workshops that we did that talked about unconscious bias, that talked about best practices for nominating committees, and again, putting together the data for those societies. They came in. And what we saw when we did the actual intervention and the workshops and brought people together in a community, and they understood that everyone was dealing with these issues, we had great success. So in 2010, we did our first intervention. In 2011 and 2012, we saw a great spike in the number of women who were getting these scholarly recognition in the different societies. We did not do interventions for 2 years, and we saw those numbers come down again. We did another intervention where we brought everyone together once again in 2012, 2013, and 2 years later, we saw the numbers come down again. So that would be my third point, is the point of sustainability. And Michelle, you mentioned that in terms of programs. I think sustainability is really important. And that's an area where the federal agencies really could help as well. Many times programs are seeded and started, and they don't have the capability or the ability to be sustained over a longer period of time. We look at interventions in the very short term and not consider how change happens over time. And so we are continuing, although the funding for this program stopped, we're continuing to take a look at the program through some of our partnerships, and the partnership with Stanford, and taking a look at how do we get at sustainability, because I think that's such an important initiative. And then finally, what I would say is working across community. And when we look at community, we have corporate partners, we have institutional partners, we have professional society partners that we worked with, and we also work with a lot of the federal agencies. And I think the combined efforts of bringing multiple employment sector and workplaces together really can have an impact as well, because best practices aren't just stuck at one particular institution. They really are across all types of organizations and come about in different ways.
Thank you. Do we have a question behind this? Yes, please. And if you have one, please go ahead and go to the microphone so we're ready to go one after the other.
Julian Earls, both from NASA and Cleveland State University. Could you speak to the impact of HBCUs in addressing this issue?
I can, but I'm not a panelist. I'm a moderator.
I can jump in.
I'll let you do, and then I'll speak if I need to. Some of you have gone to. Go ahead.
So first an anecdote, I guess. But I grew up in Louisiana, and one of the first jobs I had was a fast food place. I absolutely hated it. I could go into details about it, but the highlight of the day was taking out the trash to the dumpster in the back. But that same summer, I got my first technical job at Southern University, Baton Rouge, and I was working in a biology lab, in a university biology lab, and it made me realize, hey, this whole science thing can make money, and I'm very interested in this. And so that was, the power of, number one, the power of HBCUs in being able to reach communities that more easily than some other universities can is remarkably valuable and must be part of the table. And other MSIs as well, other minority serving institutions as well, women serving institutions as well. So all of those are remarkably valuable and essential. So when we build alliances through NSF or through NASA programs, whatever, these institutions must be integral parts of what we do.
Anyone else?
I would just jump in and remind again on the theme, it normalizes participation. People get a chance to be a part of a lab and to experience an authentic research experience and to build a community, and it becomes just a normal thing, and you start seeing yourself on a normal everyday basis being that kind of person in that kind of community and being successful. And so moving outside of that community is not a violation of your sense of self and what's normal and good for human beings. It's a creation of a culture of its own, but then can spill out into other cultures and critical in an environment that has isolated people in whatever categories, bias or implicit or explicit.
And the comment I was going to make was that HBCUs make up 5% of higher ed, 3 to 5%. And they produce 30% of the STEM PhDs. Now, who's carrying the burden here? Yeah. And who's being funded? Now, the NSF has an HBCU Up program, and they do a really good job. Claudia Rankins is the director of that program. I can't say enough about it, but it's not enough that you cannot have a small number of under-resourced institutions producing most of the STEM PhDs of color. But it's just not, it's not feasible. Please.
Hi, Anna Park, CEO of Great Minds in STEM. I have one comment and one question. The first comment would be, we're very fortunate to work with many, many passionate deans who care a lot about diversity. A lot of them are in this room today. Dean Yanis Yostros from USC, Dean Makari from University of New Orleans, Dean Golshani is here from CSU Long Beach, and partnering with affinity organizations, they are making significant differences on their campus and working with us. And so we do have a lot of deans doing great work, also following Dr. John Slaughter and all his outstanding work, because he's a champion for many of us in diversity organizations. My question is about with faculty. The affinity groups, we got together and we applied for an NSF grant, which we received, ASSIST. And for the first time, the 7 organizations, NSBE, Great Minds in STEM, SACNAS, ACES, SWE, MAYAS, and SHIP, are all supporting all of our deans with faculty development for young faculty. Because we realize that's one area we can all collaborate on, and we can support you by bringing them to our conferences. I think a lot of you know us for students and outreach at our conferences, but we want to help, and that was a place we felt we could help and bring your young faculty so we can help them get tenure, because many of our students talk about the fact that they don't have faculty that has gone through the roads they've gone through, and we need more faculty, so we're there supporting that. So my question is, how can all of our affinity groups better work with your organizations to spread the word, number one, about ASSIST, but be a resource for you and do even more, because it is going to take all of us to make this happen and make these changes. Thank you.
Are you directing that to Janet? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Or to Janet or to Dr.
And anybody
Manuel,
else
or
who wants
to anybody
but
on the
to
panel.
Janet first. Mhm.
Well, again, I do think that it is important for affinity and advocacy groups to work together, but that's why I was saying across multiple sectors. So with the scholarly societies, I think is really important across the different types of institutions. We were 5 years ago when we were asked to host the meetings, the advanced meetings for the National Science Foundation. What we said was, you have to include other groups, because I think people involved in that program know that the early cohorts were R1 institutions. And we said you can't succeed in making change if you don't pull in community colleges, MSIs, the professional societies. So we've been very successful in doing that. I would also say another part of what we should look at, not only the affinity groups working together across the institution, but also working on advocacy initiatives. So AWIS is the only organization in Washington, D.C. right now that supports full-time policy presence on the Hill, working at the nexus of STEM and gender. And I think that that's an important component, too, that we oftentimes forget, and that academic institutions actually shy away from. And yet, that's where a lot of change can happen.
Stephen?
Yeah, one thing I would suggest also, so the NASA Space Grant Network is another resource that you could use to help get out the word. It's every state plus DC and Puerto Rico. So that's a way to reach over 900 organizations right there, and we can advertise those type of opportunities to our students. There's a Compact for Faculty Diversity that's run every year, and they do a lot of great work along similar lines for getting students thinking about faculty life, thinking about academic careers, and letting them know honestly what it's like. So we'd love to advertise and have more NASA students engaged.
Who got to the mic first?
I think I did.
Okay. 1, 2. And then if there are any virtual, let me know. Okay.
Just wanted to talk about the numbers of minority faculty and the issues of minority faculty. I think, especially within the STEM disciplines, I have the opportunity to work for FAMU and FSU at the same time in the only joint college between a minority and a majority school. Our minority students are like gold. They get jobs off the bat, right away. They do not go to grad school. Period. I run several minority internship programs. I'm the DOE Massey Chair of Excellence. We can't find the people who will get into these programs. I actually run a dream internship program. I pay $11,800 for students for 10 weeks. It's difficult to find the right one. I go to different schools trying to recruit. I do all sorts of things to get the right students in for the different programs I run. Rather than pay, I mean, the easy thing is to pay lip service, just go pick a student and put in there. That's not what we want to do. How do we generate interest within the minority populations so they can go to grad school? If I offer them $20-something thousand to come to grad school and a job gives them $80,000, how do I compete?
Can I ask, we've got 5 more minutes, and I want to be fair to the gentleman at the mic, and no, okay, but please go ahead. I just wanted to give us we got 5 minutes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll use 1 minute.
Okay.
So the first thing that comes to mind is starting as early as possible in undergraduate research experiences. So by junior year in college, I was thinking, get a job, get out, get a job. But I had an undergraduate research experience, actually it was through the GEM program. And at Tech, what we found is our most likely students to enter the graduate program are students that we've gotten engaged as sophomores and at juniors to tell them show them what it's like to do research on campus. And that gives us an opportunity, which we take every chance we get, to talk about graduate school and possible academic careers. So undergraduate research experiences, one tool to use.
A quick, just one sentence. If Ford offers them a position, or GM, or any of the big companies, they'll go there, they won't take the REU.
Can I just make one comment? Yes. I think there's this perception that you go to graduate school to become a faculty member,
Yep.
and that dissuades a lot of students. I try to tell students there are a lot of different job opportunities outside of academia that you can use a PhD for. One thing that we haven't talked about, and maybe Dava has, this is near to her heart, is public policy. We don't have a lot of students going into science policy. There's not a lot of fellowships in that area to advocate for science and STEM fields. So just getting to students ahead of time and telling them you don't have to be like me and work all these hours and be an academic. Yeah.
And some of those models aren't the best models either, because they work day and night. And who wants a life like that, particularly in this generation, please?
Yes, I'm Giannis Georgios. I'm the Dean of USC Viterbi School of Engineering. And I thank Anna for introducing me indirectly. I just wanted to mention a few things that perhaps are not well known, but the Engineering Deans of the United States, the Engineering Deans Council, has started a diversity initiative, a pledge letter that was signed last year. And it is now signed by 178 engineering deans in the country. It's been supported by the OSTP, and President Obama actually mentioned it a couple of times in his at the Inclusive Entrepreneurship Summit last year, as well as the Global Entrepreneurship Summit earlier this year in San Francisco. This pledge calls for making specific initiatives that touch upon all the things that we discuss here and we're discussing, including from faculty to graduate students to undergraduate, community colleges, as well as K through 12. And the ASE, the American Society of Engineering Education, is creating a website in which best practices will be collected there. So that would be a repository of best practices for what people do. I want to single out also an event that took place, a workshop that took place at the ASEE meeting, the American Society of Engineering Education meeting in New Orleans last month, organized by John Slaughter, that also was mentioned by Anna, on the African American engineering experience and how do we make sure that we increase the number of African American engineering students and faculty and the like. It was a wonderful workshop. There will be papers that come out of this workshop by probably the end of the year. And I wish that similar type of workshops are able to be held for women as well as, let's say, for Hispanic Americans, because this is a wonderful opportunity to collect best practices, and these best practices will be articulated and summarized in papers like that. So I think I do agree with Anna that there is a need for more better way of sharing this information and having repositories of knowledge and best practices for this, because there are so many things that we do ourselves, but there is actually there is a need for some sort of a clearing house, if you like, for all that.
Thank you for your question or your comment. Let me quickly mention that you'll hear more about this tomorrow, but in fact, NASA is trying to make Mission STEM, the website, a repository for such things, both as interviews with people who are doing promising practices on their campuses, and to collect from you the things that you are doing on your campuses and in your museums and other organizations. And a panel will review those, and then those that seem to be most promising will be posted on the website. You'll hear a little bit more about this tomorrow, but I want you to know that NASA is on it. We're out of time, okay. And I'm going to be respectful to the people who are on the tube. I'm sorry. I want to also make sure we have an opportunity to thank this wonderful panel who has done a tremendous job, I think, of sharing the practices. And with that said, it's time to move. Thank you. I'm sorry.